You're listening to the Next Level Construction Management Podcast, celebrating unapologetic greatness, proudly promoting meritocracy, and daring to be different by design. Here's your host, Rob Crum, ready to take your construction management performance to the next level.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Next Level Construction Management Podcast, taking your construction management performance to the next level. And where today we are going to go on that much anticipated date with the lighting submittal Sheila. So, first and foremost, why am I going on a date with a submittal? Rob, you're a happily married man. I mean, come on. Talk about outkicking your coverage. Have you seen your beautiful wife, Kelsey? Don't worry, guys. It's just a business date. So, as you already know, I believe very firmly in process level submittal review. It really is paramount to identifying the majority of constructability, form, and function items that need addressed on a project. That and so much more on this week's episode, next. Man, check out my son Wade doing his sheep riding. Alright, before I go any further, let me quickly explain what I mean by constructability, form, and function. Constructability, simply stated, can the project be built per the plans and specs? Now, anyone that's been in this profession for more than a month knows the answer to this is obviously no. And that is by no means a shot at our designer team friends. Let's honestly recognize their efforts, working on tight deadlines and in many cases through multiple revisions and test fits prior to the GC ever seeing the plans. Next, let me say this. Every general contractor is going to identify the constructability issues. The big question is, when? Look at it this way. Let's say that there's a specified, fully recessed paper towel dispenser that is too large for the wall type it's to be installed in. Well, it will be discovered from a constructability standpoint. But is it going to be discovered during the submittal phase, when it can be addressed with no to minimal cost or schedule impact? Or is it going to be discovered when it's trying to be installed, towards the end of the project, when it will be much more expensive and time-consuming to correct? Fairly straightforward, right? Now, the other two items, form and function, rarely, if ever, get any attention from the general contractor. Form is obviously the aesthetic look of the end product. Something could be constructible and functional, but aesthetically look like crap. Here's an example of a conference room that was centered on this wall, and the conference room table with specific core drill locations for power to come up through the legs was centered on this dimension. Yep, now the TV and table aren't centered to each other, so there were no issues with constructability or functionality, but aesthetically the form, not a good look. And now lastly, function. How about this? The base cabinets at a break room that open right into the adjacent glass office wall. Again, constructability good, and aesthetically form looks good, but the end functionality, nope, not right. This is what I'm referring to here. So, why do I believe that form and function are ignored by most construction managers? Now, I'm speculating, granted, but I'm guessing it's because that most issues that arise from either of these generally aren't discovered till after construction completion, and therefore most GCs probably don't feel any obligation to worry about them. Well, to that I say, you are an asshole. As I previously stated, my goal is to build it right the first time, period. But that encompasses all three of these components. Why would I want to build something from a constructible standpoint and then find out later that there are aesthetic or functionality issues? These end users pay a lot of time and money and invest emotionally into their new space. So to take this not my problem attitude is frankly pretty shitty. I want to be proud of the space I turn over, and hopefully it exceeds the end user's visions and functions as designed. So, small point of self-deprecation here. All the examples I just gave were projects this guy ran. So, the bulk of my expertise on this topic is bedrocked in failures. But it is precisely because of those failures that I'm now able to very easily do a thorough review of submittals and identify problem issues well in advance of them becoming problem issues. And as I mentioned in a prior episode, a lot of companies and people believe they are doing excellent submittal reviews, when in actuality they are doing them at a procedural level, at best. In some cases, yeah, probably most cases, it's essentially just an administrative rubber stamp with maybe a quick review of manufacturer and model number. I believe that a lot of this is due to an underlying management style, which is candidly based out of fear. The fear that if that submittal isn't sent immediately to get that submittal review clock going, that the material procurement might be in jeopardy. Or maybe it's a fear that the competency of the reviewers isn't to a level beyond a basic administrative procedural level. Or maybe it's that not my job mentality. Or lastly, possibly just an honest ignorance and lack of knowledge of what to identify and the importance and the benefits of identifying these items. So, circling back, what does any of this have to do with taking a submittal on a date? Here's what. The reality is that your submittal review is probably your one chance to review that material, to identify any, all, as many as you can find issues with this material that may arise or will cause constructability, form, and function issues. And as I mentioned, when submittals are reviewed, as is most often the case at this administrative or procedural level, that is essentially the equivalent of going on a first date with someone that is going to be your first and only date to identify any issues with attraction, compatibility, whatever that you can find. Because after that date, if you don't find reasons to allow more time to establish if that person is right for you, too bad, so sad, you are stuck with them. So the administrative procedural review is honestly the equivalent of giving a data review of physical characteristics, asking her name, where she's from, and what she does for a living. Would that be enough to determine that, oh yeah, this person's a good match, let's move to a committed relationship? Of course not. That is ridiculous. Hell, that takes that show 90 Day Fiancé and makes it look like a forever courtship. How many breakups would this lead to? How many misunderstandings and how many instances of incompatibility? So why is this the level of review your submittals are getting? Because that is what occurs. Once you review and send it along for final approval, when it comes back to release, you're committed to releasing it and ordering it, installing it, and dealing with whatever issues come thereafter. This is what I jokingly call going from being a garbage man to a fireman. All you're doing is piling up a bunch of garbage quality work in a dumpster. What eventually happens to that dumpster? Boom, you got it. Right on fire. And now you're over there trying to put it out at the end of your project. And it may be exactly what is on the plans and meets the specs, but that doesn't mean it will work from a constructability, form, and function perspective. Now, the typical response I'll receive here is, well, that's not your job to review it to those levels. It's the architects, it's the engineers, the whoever. But again, just because it's not your job doesn't mean it won't be your problem. And it will be your fucking problem. I'm sorry about the language, but this attitude just pisses me off. So why deal with a bunch of problems at the tail end of the project that could have been identified, attacked, and resolved at the beginning? This is the paradigm shift you have to embrace to go from a procedural level to a process level manager. But before we get into the specifics on this, let's get that corporate disclaimer out of the way. The opinions and language expressed on this podcast are mine and mine alone and do not represent those of any current or former employers. Okay, so sticking with our date analogy, I get one chance to get to know this person before being committed to them. So obviously I'm going to go beyond the basic questions I've already mentioned. And since this is a date, I'm going to do my absolute best to divert all my attention to this person, to take as much time as I need to get to know them, ask about their childhood, their friends, what are their interests outside of work, what's their family like, anything, everything. Now on this date, much like while you're doing your submittal review, you may have some interruptions that must be addressed. Maybe you had to glance at, even respond to a couple text messages. Hell, you might have even had a brief phone call. Or maybe you looked up to check the score of the game that's on the TV in the restaurant you're at. But those are the exception to the date, not the rule. And the bulk of your focus and attention is spent on getting to know this person, to truly feel comfortable that this is someone you can move forward with. That is how you need to treat your submittals. Take as much time as you need to review them. Block out as many interruptions as you can and focus on getting to know that material on all aspects of the project. Again, constructability, form, and function. Now that I've established all that, let's get into the specifics of the lighting submittal review. But here's a general disclaimer as to the importance of doing this. Please understand that the vast majority of the time, and this is going to be true for all your trades, but our example is lighting. So in this case, your electrical project manager probably didn't look at the submittal at all. I would say that 95 to 99% of the time, if I find something just glaringly, obviously, atrociously wrong with a submittal, I'll call the PM about it. Here's the usual response. First, they always apologize in advance, and then tell me that honestly, they just got it from their vendor and forwarded it over, didn't look at it at all. So if you've been operating under this false pretense that it's been reviewed by them and they've confirmed it's in compliance, and that's why you think it's okay to just forward it to the design team for final approval without a process level review, hopefully this is all starting to make sense. Okay, diving in. Let's start with the cover sheets. To hell with that. We just spent the bulk of episode 3 going over in painstaking detail regarding RFIs at the process level. So I'm not going to spend any time on that here. To recap episode 3, don't suck. Please revisit that episode for a refresher. All right, time to discuss the items you should look at to identify during a light fixture submittal review. First thing to check will be the obvious procedural level check of confirming that each fixture type listed on the fixture schedule matches the submittal. You know, manufacturer, model number, catalog number review. Now, I'll get into this comparison in more detail next, but if your plans have a light fixture schedule on both the architectural RCP and the electrical RCP, you'll want to make sure that these schedules match before checking either of them against the submittal. And obviously, any differences you notice, you'll want to bring up to the design team for clarification. Well, that concludes the procedural level review. Whew, didn't think we'd ever get through that. Now, let's get to the expert level stuff and look at some of the process level items. First thing I'm going to do will be a comparison between the architectural and electrical reflected ceiling plans. Here's the core reason I do this. The electrical subcontractor is more than likely going to default to using the electrical reflected ceiling plan as their gospel. But the architect usually didn't create that sheet. The architect created the architectural reflected ceiling plan and sent that to the engineer to create the electrical RCP. So there are sometimes discrepancies between these two sheets. And in my experience, the architect is going to expect their plans are followed, especially when the discrepancies aren't brought up prior to installation. Now, I can already hear some people out there, and honestly, just shut up with this. I do not want to hear, don't you know, Rob, the electrician is contracted to the whole set, not just the electrical sheets. Look, this show is about managing to reality, and not some utopian fantasy world where everyone does everything perfectly here. Rule number 1, people are lazy, stupid, or a combination of both. You're starting to see how all these things I'm talking about are interrelated? Manage to this rule. Manage to reality. And the reality is that the electricians typically follow, holy crap, the electrical sheets. Look, if your goal is to have a strong position to point the finger when things go wrong, by all means, take the other approach. But my goal is to build things correctly the first time, period. And given that goal, I need to manage to reality and not to what is contracted to. I'm just checking here. But this is the Next Level Construction Management Podcast. Not the Next Level Contracts or the Next Level Cover Your Ass with Contractual Language or the Next Level F People Over. It's the Next Level Construction. Construction. We are here to discuss how to construct our projects to the next level. So, that's the why. Now let's talk about the what and how. First, do a fixture count of each light fixture on your RCP, including EM fixtures. So, if there's 100 total type A fixtures, but 20 of them are EM, I will have 80 type A fixtures listed and 20 type A EM fixtures noted. Now to do this, I will use colored pencils and literally color each fixture on a different color and just jot down tack marks at the top of the page. Helpful hint here. I will then scan these sheets when I'm done, save them to a folder in my project files. You will be surprised at how often you'll want to reference generic submittal notes and takeoffs. I mean, you've already done the work. Why put yourself in a position of doing it again when you can just save it? And yes, I understand that everyone does everything electronically now. So, what kind of dinosaur am I that still prints plans and highlights a hard copy? Seriously, you see the lack of hair here? That's not by choice. That is God's will that I do not have hair. And what isn't bald up there? See over here? Oh yeah, see those? Yeah, that's all gray. Look, I even got some of them wisdom whiskers. What my dad used to call them things, the wisdom whiskers. So, I'm the type of dinosaur that knows if you do it electronically, you will miss items that you would otherwise catch with a hard copy. I guarantee that if I did it the hard copy way, made all my notes, and then had that memory eraser thing for Men in Black used on me.
A standard issue neuralizer.
Yes, a standard issue neuralizer. And then I did it again electronically. I'd probably guess I'd miss anywhere between I'd say upwards of 20% of the items I caught doing it with the hard copy method. Just a friendly get off my lawn warning.
Get off my lawn.
Thank you. Okay. Once you're done once you're done doing your takeoff, compare the totals for each light fixture between the sheets. Do they match? If so, great. Now compare them to what your submittal has listed, or just note these quantities on the submittal. But if your takeoff between the RCPs don't match, now you are on your way to beginning to address the issues with the light fixtures. Now, one thing to understand here, not everything you identify during your submittal review is necessarily going to be noted on your submittal, nor may it be something that delays you forwarding the submittal for final approval. But the goal here, what you want to do, is use this submittal review as your opportunity to review that material in as much detail as possible from an overall project basis. In a perfect world, you'll come out of it with nothing but a bunch of clarifications needed, but none of them will delay getting the submittal forwarded, reviewed, or released. But once the responses to those questions are received, the risk of issues with those materials will be as close to zero as possible. Next, review the layout of the lights between these pages. Now, you can do this concurrently as you do your takeoff, but you'll probably want to do these more of a fixture by fixture basis between the sheets. With this, you'll want to review the orientation of the lights, their spacing, any alignment issues, and confirm that the ceiling types match between the RCPs. Okay, now that all that has been reviewed and either confirmed or discrepancies noted for clarification, review each submittal And since you know what ceiling type is specified to be installed in, drywall, acoustical ceiling tile, exposed, etc., check the product data to ensure that the ceiling type is listed. Here's an actual example of an exit light that was specified on a project I did, and one of the locations it was to be installed on was an exposed ceiling. See the issue? Now, it could be something as simple as having a different trim catalog designation for a different ceiling type and the incorrect trim number listed. If you just confirm the catalog number on the submittal matches the number on the plans, but the number on the plans has a trim for an acoustical ceiling tile, but the fixture is being installed in a drywall ceiling, and the trims are specific for each ceiling type and are not interchangeable. Again, starting to see what we're doing, why we're doing this now. Imagine the issue I just laid out. You waited 12 weeks for this light. It's holding up closing in drywall ceilings and is on the critical path. And it finally arrives with the correct, but really incorrect trim kit. Good luck meeting your completion date now, Skippy. Next, take a look at your light switch locations and confirm that the switching makes sense. What do I mean by this and what should you be looking for? Okay, good questions. For the light switches, how about this? See the issue here? Yep, this light switch is shown to be installed on a glass partition. All right, check to ensure that the switches aren't behind where a door will open, especially if it has an occupancy sensor on it. That it's not being installed on a special finish wall, wood wall with a high-end wall covering, something like that. In most cases, this may be by design, but it's not going to hurt to double check. There's a very good possibility that once it's identified, that the design team may decide that the feature wall shouldn't have or wasn't supposed to have a switch on it. Obviously, you'll also want to do this for thermostats and other similar wall-mounted devices. Other things to check while reviewing switches. Check for three-way switches. Do they make sense? Check for occupancy sensors, vacancy sensors, and ensure these applications make sense. Typically, I'd see occupancy for communal areas, open areas, hallways, break rooms, reception areas, things of that nature, and vacancy for conference rooms. I've seen offices get both. And as part of this, depending on the energy code or the jurisdiction, or this could just be designer specified, check to see if the convenience outlet in the room is tied to that light sensor. If it is, then confirm from the furniture floor plan that this outlet will actually be the convenience outlet and is not to be the outlet for the desk. Take a look at this. See the issue here? Oh, if you're not familiar with this issue, let me explain it real quick. Well, the specified outlet is wired to the light sensor, which obviously senses when the room is unoccupied for a specified period of time. Once that time hits, lights go off. And in this case, the power to this outlet will be turned off as well. So, if this outlet for the person is at their desk, anytime they go to the bathroom for a number 2 amount of time, step out for lunch, head to the conference room for a meeting, go home for the day, every time their computers and everything plugged into that outlet will turn off. And when they come back in, the lights will turn on. So will the power to that outlet. And all those electronics will restart. Yep, that won't be annoying at all. Oh, and look at the location of this office. Perfect. Corner office, C-suite, executive office, big boss, big problems. Also with the switches, are there any existing to remain lights? Are they now show to be on a dimming or daylight harvesting? Do those existing fixtures have ballast capable of meeting these applications? It's going to be a real shame failing those energy compliant tests at the end of the project because of these oversights. Next up, lighting zones. Again, this is where having a hard set of plans to mark up is helpful.
Get off my lawn.
Yes, you're going to get off your lawn, don't worry. It's basically just take a highlighter, put it around all the lights in each lighting zone, then find the switch for that zone and see if everything makes sense. Are there lights fixtures that seem to be in a zone adjacent to the one it's noted for? Maybe grouped in with fixtures from a different zone that are on a different switch or sensor. I'd say it's 50-50. The things you identify are a mistake, or if they're by design. Now, I will always tell my design team when I'm bringing things up like this, I am not doing it to nitpick, try to point out errors, or make them look bad. I just want to utilize my experience to identify possible items for clarification. Once it's been addressed, I will build it however you want. But I do feel an obligation to identify these items for clarification and discussion. Here's an example of some lights that were in a lighting zone that didn't make sense. Once this was identified and an RFI issued, they were reassigned to a different lighting zone prior to wiring for the lights even starting. No schedule impact, no cost impact, constructability, form, function. Check, check, and check. Next one's an easy one, but we'll also come back to it in another context later. Mounting heights. Just give each of the lights on the RCP a quick look to confirm that either a ceiling height is provided for the lights being installed in ceilings, or for lights like pendants, check to make sure that a mounting height is listed. Also, for pendants, you want to check the submittal to see how this correlates to the fixture for ordering purposes. Does an exact cord length need to be specified, or can be cut in the field? That's easy enough, right? Big one here. Remote drivers. A lot of fixtures these days have remote drivers. And a key to remember about these is that they typically need to be accessible. But if you look at the submittal, and in some cases you might have to look at the install instructions, you'll see that you can typically group a certain number of fixtures together on one driver. You'll also find any distance constraints for how far the driver can be from the fixtures. Use this information to strategically determine what the minimum number of drivers you need is and where you can put the drivers so they're still accessible. The last thing your design team is probably going to want to see is a single driver for every fixture and them just installed wherever in exposed ceiling or a bunch of access panels and drywall ceilings. But if this isn't identified early and is left to the discretion of the subcontractor, it's going to be a very bad conversation to have with the design team and the client. Last handful of things we'll discuss, and I'll try to motor through these things quickly. For any of the lights I mentioned earlier that have an EM associated with them, an emergency component, check the submittal to see if there are specific EM components that have to be selected for them to be ordered correctly. If so, I would recommend either making a copy of that non-EM submittal and using that copy as its own fixture for the EM, or circle that EM component and note next to it how many fixtures will have this. Similarly for exit lights, most of the time you will get a single exit light submittal. Most of the time it's not even really completed. Now, that may be okay if the exit light has those removable tabs that you can customize in the field. But not all of them have this. So, double check this submittal. And honestly, if it isn't one of those customizable ones, you're probably going to want to spend some time doing a takeoff of what you need. One-sided versus two-sided. Right arrow, left arrow, double arrows, ceiling mounted, wall mounted. And make a separate submittal for each type you need. Or you could push it back to the electrician, wait 2 to 3 weeks, only to get it back incorrect again, end up having to do it yourself anyways. All the while risking the lead time on all other light fixtures. Because yes, if you didn't know, the electrician and their lighting supplier, they want to release the entire lighting submittal package together. And they may delay the order until everything is approved. Good job, Skippy. Again, I'm managing to the world I build in, not to the world I wish I built in. Next, check to see if you have any ACT ceilings that are existing to remain grid, but have new lights going in them. Are the lights oriented in the same direction? If not, you'll want your field to confirm where the ceiling grid's main is to ensure that the new lights aren't shown to be installed through them, which will obviously mean the existing ceiling layout. This is not going to work, so you'll need to remove and install the entire ceiling. Time and money. See this example. 3 more items, almost there. Under counter lights at millwork. Are the lights being installed at the rear of the cabinet towards the wall? Or are they being installed towards the front of the cabinet? And how are you getting it power so it doesn't end up looking like this? All right, next. Cove lights on a restroom tiled wall. The shadowing this is going to create will be substantial. So even if the installation would otherwise be acceptable, you could have huge issues. I've had all of the worst ingredients for this on a project before. Cove lighting, stack bond installation pattern, small tiles with high gloss finish. After the third time trying to reinstall this, we finally changed to a larger tile, matte finish with a brick tile install method. Problem solved. So just be cautious. Look at this photo. Now, I know this looks absolutely atrocious, but the really funny thing is the side walls without the direct cove lighting above, they look perfectly fine. All right, last item, and I'll get into more detail on this on another episode. Please coordinate your lighting with owner-provided items and owner vendors, AV, IT, security. You get it. Look, because as I've previously mentioned, you may have a pendant light in a room that you've confirmed is to be mounted at 60 inches AFF. And maybe it sits, 3 feet off of a wall. Well, if that wall has a TV that's to be installed 60 inches to the center line AFF, yep, that fixture is going to block the view of the TV. Or, here's an owner-provided floor lamp. Oh, look, there's no outlet for it. These are simple things that don't take much effort to check, but can really prevent big problems at the end of the project. Okay, thanks everyone for your continued support, and please, as always, send any questions, comments, feedback to comments.nextlevelmanagement@gmail.com. Also find Next Level Construction Management with Rob Crum on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Give the show a follow, please. Reminder, all episodes are now up on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. Short clips coming soon, and continue to add shows on additional platforms. If you could do me a very small favor, just take a minute, create an account on these platforms, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. It's free. No one's going to spam you. It's just helps the show grow. This will let you know when new episodes come out, help the show become more visible. And as always, if you could, please share or repost the videos or reels. This really helps spread the message and will help the show grow as well. Thanks, and I will talk to everyone next time. God bless America, and as always, Team GSD, be relentless.
Thank you for listening to the Next Level Construction Management Podcast.